All right, everyone. Welcome back to Quick Coffee. It's been a while, I think. It's been a
Finally.
couple of weeks that we have not been recording our podcast. But super excited to be back, Pat, and it's good to see you. I mean, we catched up already, but how are you doing? And how's life for you been the kind of last couple of weeks?
Yeah, so it's good to be back. I'm really excited to be restarting Quick Coffee. And there were actually, I think there were a couple of reasons why we ended up doing like the second or third break from Quick Coffee this year. But the main reason for me was I actually discovered after a couple of weeks of knee pain that I had a meniscus tear. Or a small tear in my meniscus. I actually don't know up until today where specifically it came from. But we went on vacation on Mallorca, and then I ended up running quite a lot there, and pain just kept increasing, and so I ended up doing an MRI here in Amsterdam, and found out, and then I had surgery. I think 1 or 2 weeks back, and this is actually quite interesting. I mean, meniscus is basically an injury that just heals super slowly. And so, and so I've now been using crutches for I think the last 4 weeks, doing physiotherapy. I'm doing basically rehab exercises downstairs in the small home gym that we've built nearly every day. And so it's basically been like that. That has been another just another thing. And so we had to stop Quick Coffee because I had to prioritize the recovery. And I would have actually right now I would have been in LA at the All In Summit, and I also canceled going there because of that. It just feels like, I mean, just looking at 2025, it feels like a crazy year of like all the things that have been happening. And so that's just been, one more thing. So I hope that I will, be able to remove the crutches in around 1.5 weeks, and then start, walking again normally and things like that.
Insane,
But yeah, that has been a big thing. Yeah.
insane. You're a rock star, man. Honestly, like I'm always like questioning, or like asking myself how you're handling all of this. Managing the family, two little ones, a newly founded AI company. Uh, Man, I don't. I mean, it's like
Like, I mean, honestly, I mean, people on a regular basis kind of ask me how we do it. There, every day every day is a challenge, right now, especially right now. The thing is, what I noticed, when you have crutches, it's like one of the most prohibitive things for your lifestyle, right? Because
yeah.
you cannot do anything with your hands while walking. So you
Ah,
can't, so if you, so in the morning when I make myself breakfast, it actually takes me like 15 minutes, because you have to, every time that you walk between like the table and any kind of cupboard, you have to use the crutches, right? And then you place it from there to there, and then you go back and forth. Everything takes ages, and so it's crazy. So that's why. And honestly, like, I mean, I think in the last couple of years, I have not often, been able to always, 100% prioritize health. And that's been one of the things for me, kind of to learn and develop myself, right? To really be able to make these hard decisions. And I actually think that I've made progress over the last years in that, because when I actually learned that I had this and I had gotten surgery, I was like, look, I'm going to cancel LA. I'm going to like literally do these exercises every single day, because I was just so motivated to get rid of the crutches and be able to walk again, especially with two small children in the house. Right. And so it's been just wild. But I think, I mean, quick coffee
yeah.
quick coffee is a realistic representation of our life. And the reality is also, when you look at this year, I think this year we've had like most breaks. We've had like most, where we just didn't release an episode in a week. And it's just accurate, right? Because this year has been absolutely crazy with the new companies, you joining Lovable, like, all of the things that have been happening now. And it's still 4 months to go in the year, right? Like, who knows what's going to come. But on the other side, like, I mean, this is really, we're building something, we're making new investments. We're actually going to introduce our new website today. So it is, a project at heart.
Are
And
we?
so, of course, yeah, I heard, maybe you'll give the details. But first, over to you. How is it? Are you in the Lovable office? Or you're in Stockholm?
No, I'm at Creandum right now in London.
Oh, nice.
So I'm visiting London right now. Me and Nat, we're working from here. We do have a little office here, and we're planning to grow the team, even though the core hub is still in Stockholm. I think, since, Ned is already living in London, there's a potential for us to also, over time, potentially have more people in London as well. But no,
Design or also engineering
I
or
guess to be discussed. We have one other engineer in London as well. I think if you just look at talent, right? And I think, like, thinking about it like long term, if you want to hire the best people in the world, it's always obviously very hard to focus only on one specific city. And so
100%.
even now, I think it was definitely the, absolutely best decision to have everyone in Stockholm, or like almost everyone in Stockholm, because that just made kind of us working so closely together way easier. And it's a different energy, right? When you're in the office, everyone is there, everyone is just pushing things through. So I think thinking about us in like the early days, it was the best decision ever. But now, growing to this like new stage of a company, I could see that potentially in the next months or years, we're going to change how we think about offices and hubs. But, still very, very much early on. For now, the focus is Stockholm. We're hiring mainly in Stockholm. I think quite exciting times ahead. On a personal side, also like pretty much going through a bunch of like ups and downs last couple of weeks and months. But I'm kind of excited to now kind of get back to building in public, or like sharing in public, using Quick Coffee as our journal, both on a professional side, but I guess also on a personal side, right? I mean,
100%.
to me, Quick Coffee is more personal than professional. It's like, yes, we're talking about Lovable, and we're talking about Superscale, and we're talking about, the intersection of AI and design, and what it means to build voice interfaces, etc. But that also comes from a passion point of view, right? And it's not always just connected to our daily jobs. And on top of that, I think it's nice to have this weekly check-in between the two of us to just talk about whatever's going on in our lives.
100%, 100%. I mean, honestly, I think it's important for people to know that, like, I mean, sometimes, obviously, we talk about things on Quick Coffee that we have already talked about, offline, and just the two of us. But there's actually things that we talk about on Quick Coffee that are completely new, right? Where we're actually hearing each other's opinion for the first time. So we are kind of consciously making it a non-scripted, call of the two of us that's recorded. That's basically how we're designing it. And honestly, when I look back, like even on a day, like even still, we haven't released an episode for a couple of weeks, but I regularly meet people still that know some fact about my life, something personal, like literally, where I live, or that I have two children.
Do you find that weird?
No, not at all. I mean, it's kind of like, for me, it's always like, it's just positively surprising how many people tune into the podcast, and it's kind of like this personal way of connecting. And you immediately have like I was talking to a Superscale customer this week, a new customer, someone that I hadn't talked about, and they had, listened to here and there an episode, kind of knowing about things. So that's something that I consider to be just incredibly, positive about it. And I am actually looking forward, going back in a couple of years and just listening myself to a couple of these episodes, because it's just like a complete, it's a personal diary. Right. Yeah. And right now, like this thing for me with my knee is like something, it's just very personal in the moment right now. It's affecting me a lot. And I have done so much research now, on how to rehab from, a meniscus injury. And I have this whole Instagram algorithm now where I'm getting like, all these videos every day. And I think it's also important kind of to show that, whatever you see online is just a small representation, and maybe this is a bit more authentic and realistic window into our lives, and I hope that people enjoy that. So that's pretty cool. So yeah, that's the update, and I'm super excited that we're back, and this is episode 90, so we have another.
Let's go.
Exactly.
So we're gonna hit the 100 this year.
100%. I have this morning I thought about it, and I have several ideas for the 100th Quick Coffee episode. I think it's going to be more than two or 2.5 years since we launched. I have several ideas, but maybe we
can do it live also.
Something like that. Yeah, exactly. So I was thinking, like, let's make this one a really big episode. episode, but there's
Cool.
still 9 or 10 to come until then. For today, I was thinking about what we can talk about and what might be really interested also for people that have just recently started following your journey or my journey. And I
Yeah.
think it's quite interesting. We always see Quick Coffee when we talk about product and design things, we see it as something that's quite close to where AI is currently going, but then on the intersection of developing products and building interfaces in that space. And so you recently launched voice mode for Lovable, like you can talk with Lovable essentially. And we've been obviously doing a lot of things with voice, a bit different from that, but still extremely exciting, and also with the 11 Labs team. And so I just thought, let's talk about building voice and chat interfaces, because obviously
Yeah.
both the products that we're building include voice, features, but then also chat interfaces and kind of what's the and then also a canvas. And so there's the chat on the left or right side. We can talk about that in a moment. And then there is the canvas, and there is kind of like you do things in the canvas, you do things in the chat. How do you design that interface? And why I find that interesting is I think there's going to be a revolution online of many, many products trying to kind of find their way into this space of how do I actually include that conversational way of dealing with the product into my own product. And so I wanted to just open that question and
Yeah.
talk with you about this, like 20-25 minutes, from the perspective of someone that might have a product that doesn't include any voice, any chat, and how would they go about integrating it, and what would be the
Yeah.
thought process? So maybe you can
Yeah.
share kind of how voice looks, and we started from there, and then
Yeah. Yeah.
we take.
I can also share my screen in a second, and we can like look at what it actually looks like at within our product. But I think so, as I'm particularly interested in the interaction between humans and AI. And if you think about it, voice is just another interaction, right? It's just a different kind of way for you to have a conversation with a tool like Lovable to talk about ideas, etc. So it was obviously like a very natural move to think about, having some sort of a voice interaction within the product. This is a very early version. Like everything we've launched today, we have Elliot from our team working on it. He's been doing a fantastic job to kind of push this really kind of very early version out. But I think the way we look at it, and that's also, I guess, like a little bit of my personal take, is there are so many different ways to interact with an AI. Obviously, one is text, the other one is voice. But at the end of the day, the core idea is always, what does the conversation look like between you and a computer, you and an artificial intelligence, you and kind of your sparring partner? Like we always talk about Lovable being your co-founder, your technical co-founder. And so, what are ways for you to engage with your co-founder, to talk with your co-founder about ideas you have? And it's interesting because I feel like that when I can just talk and I can just put something out there, then I sometimes have the advantage of my thoughts not being 100% structured yet. I feel like when you write something down, you always need to think about, does that make sense logically, the input I'm giving? But I feel like especially when you think about building a first product and something very early on, it sometimes helps to just bring your ideas on paper, even if they're not fully structured yet, and then go through the flow. Because I feel sometimes structure too early prevents creativity. And maybe that's just like one way of looking at it. But so how I use Lovable today is actually especially with the first prompt, I almost always use voice, because I'm just like, hey, Lovable, can you help me build XYZ? Those are the ideas I have in mind. This is like the design and aesthetic that I would love to see, include hero section, testimonials, or it's just a very different flow. And interestingly enough, even before we launched voice at Lovable, I was using voice a lot at ChatGPT,
Interesting.
framing my thoughts and giving input. And now it's just like it's been something I've been using a lot recently.
I, I find it really interesting when like talking about these kind of two different conversation types or conversation objectives, because even at ChatGPT, I just looked at the I just looked at the interface, right? I'm actually going to pull it up quickly. When you look at this interface right here, there's basically dictate, and then there is voice mode. And I find that really interesting when you think about kind of these two differences. It's like on the one side, you have maybe a message that you want to just get out there into the input box more quickly, which is for me kind of dictating, but you know specifically what you want, you know, the message to look like. And then you have voice mode where it's much more conversational in terms of you're actually brainstorming, or you're basically
And look at it, right? I mean, if you look at this screen, it's also crazy to me that two actions are like the most primary actions ever on first glance, right? So they have two core actions here, both dictate and voice mode, and they're both the most prominent action on the entire screen. And just like
is this, but that's it's interesting, right? That's where it's going, right? I think what I find interesting is like, or maybe let me actually ask you first. Do you think that it's all going to go voice?
I mean, so to be very honest, our voice mode right now also is like not as advanced as the one that we're having here, right? Like ours is more probably towards the first, like the dictating mode. You can just give like kind of, input through voice. But I think it's a good question. I think there will be a way to combine both into just one voice mode. And, dictating should be part of that. And the AI should automatically understand whether you're giving an actual input or you're asking for something back. Where I differentiate between those modes is that the one is just you giving a monologue, like dictating, you just put something in, that's it, you send. Voice mode is you want to have a conversation, you want
Exactly.
feedback. And
Exactly.
so, but I do think there's a way. So I think when I'm thinking about our voice mode, we'll definitely try to combine both of them into one.
I mean, what I find so interesting, and it kind of even connects to the chat interface. I think when you look at the chat interface, it's kind of like where things started, and now companies like 11 Labs are enabling, people to basically put voice mode also where the chat is. But I think when we look at the chat alone, the way that I see it is the chat was the beginning, but the chat basically told people it's an input box where you give instructions. An instruction is something very different from an open conversation, right? And you have this interesting kind of mode where you can instruct Lovable, or you can converse with Lovable, right?
Yeah,
you can
chat.
just you can chat.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, how these things will kind of live next to each other. Because when I think about, like, let's take any software product, let's take Stripe. Now, if Stripe would make a transition to a more conversational user interface, they have a pretty what we would now say is like a more kind of pre-AI interface, right? Because it's like all dashboards and buttons and all these kind of things. Now, there's two ways that I would want to talk with Stripe or interface with Stripe. One is I just want it to tell me, to give me certain data or whatever, or do something. And the other thing is like, I want to have an open conversation about my business, like how could I grow my revenue? These kind of ideas, right? And so when you talk about Lovable being the co-founder, the way that I see this is basically there's two levels to this conversation. The one is you just speak literally with your co-founder about like, hey, what could we do about this product? Like where could we take this business or this app or this product? And then the other thing is basically, okay, let's bring it back to like literally making a change to the app. Right. And that's, I think, a really interesting challenge to solve. Now, when we look at Lovable, how you've done it so far, it's a mode, right? It's like you kind of switch between these two conversational levels.
I can quickly pull up my screen and we can just look at one example, because I have like one take that I find super interesting. So if we just look at like, this is like a project I built, it's just like this website. Actually, the visual is entirely built with AI. I used Midjourney.
That's awesome.
And then I used Lovable to just create this like hero section. So if we look at here on the bottom, right, now here we have our new voice mode, and I can just basically give input, right? I can say, if I allow the mic here, hey, can you change the main headline to something else? And can you use a different font? I would like to use a serif font this time. And if you click confirm, then it puts it in, and I can basically just click enter, and Lovable starts implementing it. But what I'm even more passionate about thinking about voice is, so it's a different way you give input, right? So by just, instead of typing, you speak. Now, what I find most exciting is, let's switch it around. Let's not talk about giving input. Let's talk about what's the output you're getting. So now you can see Lovable just made the change for me, right? A big learning we have at Lovable is people are not reading chat responses. So, now as you can see here, right? Like I gave Lovable an instruction. I'm not going to read through. I'll change the headline text.
You see what happened, right? You see that what you wanted happened.
Yes. And we know that actually looking into like data and metrics, we know that people are not constantly reading large text output. And that is also the reason, for example, we've been already, kind of summarizing things. And if you click on show all, there's more information popping up. The reason we're doing that is because we know people are not reading it when we want to keep it very short and we want to keep the focus rather on the actual visual output. And so you just mentioned Stripe as an example, right? I think even if you have those different types of audio conversation, like one being you just want to spare, another one is you want to give a task that you don't want to be automatically executed. I think there will always be visual feedback, but it might not necessarily be text, right? So when I think about Stripe, for example, if you give an input, even with your voice, then and what I mean with text is not even like written text. I could also see the scenario that you don't even want Lovable to now start talking about all the changes it did, but rather just show it to you, right?
Exactly.
Like
you see the change already, right? So you don't, the change is your response.
The change is your response, but that makes me think, what if we almost like get rid of the written kind of output and like constantly just focus on you giving input, and the output is then just kind of visual. Like, think about it. Like, if I would just now like keep talking, I would now say, all right, desert legends, born from dust. Now let's add another section. Boom. And instead of then Lovable telling me, hey, Felix, I just added this section. Here's what I did, A, B, C, D. It would be way better, I think, if it would just instantly do the change and I keep adding new comments and input and input. But then it's so interesting because then it's me giving input through text and voice, but Lovable giving me input and responses
output
visually and not even through talking. And I think that changes everything because then it's a different level of how you're having a conversation. It's not like having a conversation with a friend that just texts you back. It's like you give input, you get output. You give input, you get output. And you just, maybe that's almost like more like an optional feature that Lovable actually talks back to you. But now what we know from the learnings we have is that people are constantly or like most interested in the actual output ASAP, right?
100%.
We have a bunch of users that would even pay way more money to us just if the output would come way quicker. And so it's interesting thinking about this like input output formats and knowing that, if we know that the text output is almost not even used by users, we might also just get rid of it, right? And like
100%. I mean, it's a super interesting thought. I mean, by the way, this is the first quick coffee. I think this is going to be the first quick coffee episode that we're also going to put on YouTube. So, when people hear us kind of talk about sharing our screen, and you hear, about it on Spotify, we'll try to do a bit of a voiceover. So people, just listening on their commute will still understand what we're talking about. But there is kind of like an upgraded quick coffee experience now, looking at the two of us and also, where we're kind of, where we are in the world and also what we're sharing in terms of product and design, because of course, obviously it's so much more of a cool conversation to really actually look at the screen like we just did. Now, what I find interesting when I think about this is now kind of bringing it back to the question of, and I can give you a Superscale example in terms of like how I've thought about, the chat experience versus visual output and these kind of things. I think, if we bring it back to this question of what should people consider when they actually think about how could I bring a chat/voice experience to my product? I think the first question that I would ask is, what interaction levels do you think people will have with your product? And that's actually a new question, right? Because when you go back and you just had a software as a service application with a couple of buttons, there were no hierarchies in terms of how you could interact. You could just interact with what was in front of you or not. Now, when you think about, there's already different interaction levels with Lovable or with Superscale, right? So when we look at, for example, here just our ad studio screen, right? I mean, this is basically now someone has basically, this is an ad that I made. It's a person. It's all AI generated. We have been making some pretty big progress there. in terms of like, people basically talking within Superscale, like, actors. So you can see kind of her talking about a product. Now, what I find interesting is we have the chat on the right side, and you have certain inputs that you can give, with the chat. But then you have also direct interactions here on the screen. So you can go in and you can say, okay, I want to add some music. And we actually integrated 11 Labs music here. So you can literally just prompt what kind of music you want to have. And then you add it to your ad. Now, what I find interesting is when you look at the layers, it's like one layer could be to talk with, to talk with Lovable or Superscale on a strategic level of like, okay, what should I even be doing, right? What kind of ad should I build? What kind of website should I make? But then the other level is actually, making changes to whatever you're building, or you just go in and you directly edit on the canvas, right? So you can just go in here and say, look, I want to, have some options. I want to change the audio or something like that, right? And then you are actually in the canvas. So I think, and there's interactions that you might not always want to basically talk. You don't want to message all the time, or you don't want to talk all the time. And so, what are the difference? When you think about these levels, because what we actually see is people want to basically, some things they just want to chat about, some things they want to edit directly in the canvas, right? In their output, they want to see their output, they want to make the change directly, because it's just like making the actual change is actually quicker. If you wanted to cut this ad, for example, by that. So then how do you then that's actually what you need to be thinking about in terms of when you build your UI. What are these levels going to be where you make your interactions?
Yeah. And we have the same with Lovable, right? I mean, we have visual edits, which helps like you to just, if you want to do like a quick button change, then it's probably easier to just quickly use visual edits and you go in and change the button. Can you pull up your screen again? Because I just had like a few thoughts that I wanted to share with you, which I find interesting. So now that we know that voice can be a major interaction for you to kind of interact with Superscale in this view, it means we can actually get rid of a lot of things and have more real estate, right? In the world, what I see a lot, and we have the same challenge, and I think we constantly need to remind us that the beauty of keeping focus, right? So if I look at this screen, for example, especially if the sidebar's open on the left-hand side.
Yeah, I'm closing it, but it's I think it's opening when I go to Riverside, so I need to need to do it like this.
Doesn't matter. I'm just saying, like, there's lots of things going on, right? And we have the 100%. Same, right? We have our navigation, we have our left panel chat input, we have the whole like preview on the right. There's like constantly things popping up, and there's constantly things happening. And you need those things because you want to interact with those things, and they need to be visible in order to understand for you, okay, what's even possible. But what I find interesting is, and I think that's maybe a challenge for voice, is so we have a lot of people at Lovable that don't entirely know what Lovable is all capable of. And I think the same is true for you guys, right? I mean, building a first ad is a great experience to learn about Superscale and what it's capable of.
100%.
But if you would now remove everything and you just have a simple like voice interaction, then people will no longer see, buttons like vote up and down, or, add music, add text, add media, regenerate captions. So I think that's a challenge. I think you can't, because we were talking about, why we could also just get rid of everything and you just like talk about the changes you want. What I do believe, though, even this could be a challenge, even though what I do think is with those tools becoming extremely powerful, right? Like, I mean, Superscale, you can literally like create characters that look like a real human. It's insane. Lovable, you can create a product within a couple of minutes. Insane. But the biggest challenge I think that we're facing, and I do think it's related to voice, is that people don't know what's possible. There's inspiration missing. There's guidance missing. And I'm just thinking, think about this interface. Everything would be away, and you only see the video in the beginning.
You only see the ad. Yeah.
Right. Then it is so hard for me to come up with new ideas because I wouldn't know as a regular user, what is it I can even do here? What is it I can even change here? But that changes everything, because I think if we make voice our primary interaction, I think what becomes more important than ever is guiding the user and showing the users like what is possible, what the tool is capable of. It could be through voice and like showing or like talking about examples. It could be like that Superscale starts talking to me and is like, hey, Felix, so you created this character. here are a few suggestions for you that I think could make sense. Do you want to pick one of these up?
Exactly. Turned into an ad. Yeah.
You
100%.
want to turn it into an ad? But I just think that this is still something, that we also haven't figured out yet entirely. Like, how do you teach people what's possible? How do you show them what's possible? And how do you make inspiration more accessible and visible? Because inspiration is essentially what people need in order to create something on their own. We know that. That's why we have projects on our homepage, because we want to inspire people to show them what's possible. But I think we need the same in the interface, in the main project editor, not only on our homepage and marketing landing pages and ads. I think we should constantly see inspiration for a potential next step.
In terms of what's possible, 100%. I mean, the interesting thing for us is when you think about, I mean, obviously we have, that's going to be the same for Lovable. We have people coming into Superscale. There are marketing experts. They work in an agency. They have built, hundreds of UGC ads. And they are now saying, look, I'm going to do AI UGC. I'm going to scale my ad content with AI actors, and I'm going to go to Superscale and generate these kind of videos and ads. Then there is other people that have never built an ad before, and they also come to Superscale, right? And so you have these different layers. Now, the interesting realization is, the way that I imagine it from a voice, if we would bring it all back to voice, is like, on a voice level, you want to have a conversation around like what's possible in a product, what changes could you make, but there's always going to be things that you might just want to do visually, and you might just want to click. Except for when you're sitting kind of laid back and you're not even touching your computer anymore. But then you have to kind of figure out how would the platform kind of explain to you what's possible. Now, the interesting thing, what we see here, and I think that's I think voice anyways is kind of like an evolution when you have a chat in your product, right? And you evolve from there to voice. Because first you can kind of try out with chat, like how do people in a natural language way want to interact with your product? Now, what we see is when we look at how people use the chat versus the ad studio, like the actual editor, is just different ways of interacting, right? Like, for example, if I now wanted to, regenerate this ad, but then have a different person, I would just tell it in the chat, like, hey, I want to have a different actor. So it would just rebuild the whole thing. If I want to make the video like 1 second shorter and add like a screen recording of my app, because she's talking about, like in this case, she's talking about a food tracking app. I want to just maybe overlay it with a video. I would just click on add media, select the video, and be done with it. Because if I would now talk with the product and select from like 10 things in my asset drive the right video, it's just going to be easier for me to make that interaction.
Yeah.
So I think ultimately, like, we've had the chat in the product for a long time now, and people are basically having these kind of different usage patterns. And we have learned basically through that and through the day-to-day interactions that we're seeing, what do people want to talk and what do people want to click? Like, if I put it really, and then it's like, or maybe even differently, where do people want to click? Where do they want to chat? And where do they want to talk? Right. And that's what you have to figure out. And what I can imagine, honestly, that would be beautiful. It's more like right now, the latency on the AI side, like, makes it difficult because things take a while. But imagine if you would work with the tool and there would be an ongoing verbal communication that influences a couple of things. You still see things visually changing. You might even see, output, and then you make like certain adjustments, because I'm not sure if people will ever kind of sit back like this and don't touch the screen at all anymore. Or you think it's going to go 100% voice?
I think it will only work if voice is not slowing you down. It's interesting.
Exactly.
If you compare, going back to OpenAI, if we compare dictating versus having a conversation, dictating is way quicker, right? You just give an input, boom, it's being executed. Voice mode is you start talking, and then ChatGPT is like, "Oh, thank you, Felix. Sorry to hear that. Here are my ideas. Want me to make that change for you?" And then you're like, "Yes, please go make the change." Right?
This is literally so many interactions that I've seen on a chat basis, right? Where it's like, I just want to instruct you. I don't want to have a conversation in the moment.
I would even argue that our chat mode today, even though it's mainly based on dictating, is already way more powerful and quicker than this like voice AI conversation mode that ChatGPT has, because it slows you down. I think there's probably good balance between, if you ask a question, yes, there might be a way where, like, Lovable gives you actual audio feedback first before making a change. But I think in most cases, and only if you know what's possible, that's why going back to, the number one thing for us is we need to make sure that people know what Lovable is capable of. Because if people don't know that, they also won't be able to give you input. They won't be able to come up with ideas. They won't be able to give you instructions. But if we nail this, educating people about what's possible, this like giving you an instruction after instruction after instruction, I think will be the way to go forward.
100%. Yeah, super interesting. I mean, this is it's a crazy way to think about, right? I mean, and it is, maybe last point. I think a lot will, like, we even see it on our end, like the latency on the AI models is one of the biggest bottlenecks in that entire kind of UI and UX consideration, because so often you just expect an immediate input or an immediate feedback, and it's just not there yet, right? Because the model just takes a while to generate whatever you want to do in a moment. And so you can't have that immediate conversation about certain things if they take a minute to load. But then again, like we even see it now with like, VO3 and then VO3 fast, for example, as like two, video generation models, then it just accelerates massively. And then now it becomes possible to actually have a bit more of back and forth.
I think last comment, I think we need to wrap up because, initially we had this idea of keeping those episodes, 25 minutes. So we're not going to annoy people because I know that myself, right? Like I hate listening to podcasts that go over an hour because then you're like not able to listen to the entire episode because who has an hour 100%. To like listen to it? But I think, this is like, voice can only be successful if the output is constantly like shown visibly.
Instant.
And that changes everything. And we'll see where this goes. But I think, parallelly to launching voice, there's a bunch of things we have like work to do. Like there's things we need to work on and improve. And I think excited to kind of push these things out in the next few weeks.
100%. All right. Thank you all very much for coming back to Quick Coffee, listening in. We are actually launching our new website today as well. So shout out to you for working on that. That's beautiful.
It's entirely built in Lovable. So let's see how that goes.
So that's awesome. A couple of news coming in the coming weeks, new investments that we've made, and also guests we want to bring on the show, episodes we want to talk about, everything from now on YouTube as well. So looking forward.
Are we launching TikTok as well, or only YouTube?
Let's start channel by channel. But I mean, these days I'm spending a lot of time on TikTok. We can talk about that in the next episode. But more than I thought in the beginning, more than I thought than in the beginning of the year. But no, I think on the podcast side, like we'll put it to X, YouTube, and LinkedIn first, and then see how things go. Get people's feedback and see where it goes. Thank you all for listening in. I'll see you next Thursday.
See you all. Thanks for listening.